Okay, are we ready? You want to get started? This is episode 3 of Let's Talk Comics with Lily Sleeps Late. Whoa, oh my gosh, I can't believe it's the third one already. Just like the other comics classes we've done, I will be having a special practicum at the end where we look at actual examples. But of course, we're going to start with a little mini lecture from good old, slightly still sick voiced me. Let's go. First things first. Our term for today is color. Specifically, I want to think about, and it's kind of fun because we are all in black and white today, I want to think about the colors of black and whites that are used in manga. But before we get there, we got to talk about a few other things. So these two comic covers are Action Comics #1. This is from 1938, and this is from 1964. You can probably notice just by looking at these two, even though one is from 38, so the comics boom, when publishers had to publish comics very quickly, when we saw singular comics issues flying off the shelves and publishers rushing to meet demand, 64 still has similar color palettes. Their color palettes are nearly identical. So for 30 years, not much changed. The main color palettes that were used in early comic publishing were cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. So in order to create these colors that we see on screen right now, they would use a kind of series of plates where they would imprint dots on very cheap newspaper paper, expediting product quickly for the least amount of cost as possible. And so they would put these different kinds of slides on top of each other, and they would slowly but progressively add layers of color. So they'd put a layer of blue, and depending on the size and proximity of the dots, it would cause denser colors when they overlaid a second layer of magenta, and they'd keep layering and layering and layering these sheets in order to achieve this kind of dot-like texture that we see in a lot of vintage comics from the 1900s. But that also meant that we had a very limited color palette. We could only use 64 colors. And those 64 colors are essentially just varying shades and slight combinations of the colors you see on screen of cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. This is what early superhero comics decided to do. And because of these limitations of pricing, it was so much more difficult to do actual line work and reach outside of these 64 colors provided to us by these 4 color scales. We received iconic looks. We received superheroes like Superman, Kid Flash, Aqualad, and Robin. And they received very similar color palettes that were very striking to the eye. In fact, we might even say that it's because of the limitations of the genre that we got their iconic looks to begin with. This returns to what Scott McCloud, who is a comic scholar, might call amplification through simplification. And what this means is by simplifying our color schemes, we are amplifying the meaning behind those who take on those colors. Robin becomes not only the R on his chest, not only the title of Boy Wonder, but we associate him with very striking colors. Those colors become iconic. Some of these Western, eye-catching, very iconic superheroes even inspired, as we've previously discussed, manga characters. This brings us to manga. So if we were having to use 64 colors, all rising from cyan, magenta, yellow, and black for our early 1900s comics, what about manga? How did manga get over the fact that manga is popular, but we have to meet demands on a cheap budget? Well, they printed in black and white. Manga took the direction of, we don't have time to press all of these different colored dots on top of each other. We're just going to ink it black, white, and shades of gray. Now, just as a recap, for those who might not have been here in last time's comics class, we talked about the ways in which weekly releases would come out from all kinds of authors in compiled volumes called Shonen Jump. You can see what the volume's spine looks like right here. specifically. So it's this fat this fat compilation of issues of different comics. We not only had a weekly shonen jump, but we had a weekly shoujo jump. So one directed towards a male audience and one directed towards a female audience. And even though they had colorized covers, everything inside was black and white. And it became, as Thoth says in chat, a very iconic look for manga to take on. This limited color scheme became the typical practice. And storytellers are finding continuously new ways to use this limited color scale that is still the cheapest to print in Japan to still convey complex ideas within their images. In this case, again, we have the limitation of the medium acting in favor of focusing us on a specific set of ideas. Amplification through simplification. And so I want us to think about how manga uses that limitation to its advantage, how manga's black and white color scheme lends itself to the stories it's attempting to tell. I want us to think about how manga uses color. That's the end of my lecture for the most part. And this is the question that's going to focus us in today as we look at different panels from 3 comics that I've brought to the forefront for us today. These are the 3 comics we're going to talk about today when we think about, again, that question that I had up here earlier, which is, how does manga use color? Whoa, how do they do it? I guess we'll find out. Let's go! The first one we're doing is Chainsaw Man, all right? We're not going to talk about the cover so much as we're going to talk about the pages inside of the cover. So first and foremost, these pages are from the very first few pages of Chainsaw Man. And I wanted for us to focus in specifically on what ways are black, white, and shades of gray being used within this. This is from the first few pages. So we have Denji, our main character, is unshaded. So he's mostly white with just an outline. These darker colors are being used to convey shadow. Those are kind of the only times where we see black, and even then it's not super harsh. So whenever we see shadow, it's mostly just cross-hatching or line work that makes it seem like it's more of a gray than a black. There's a focus on foreground and background, so we have a separation using black and white of foreground and background. So those are the first few pages. Now I want us to focus in on this page. How are black and white being used in this specific moment? So black here is not only heightening tension, we have a lot of gray toned hues as well. So the black suffuses the gutter, but there are more shades of gray throughout, which makes the moment very ambiguous and uncertain. Our character is not drawn with heavy lines, which might indicate the fearfulness, the uncertainty of the situation as well. Now what I want to do is show this. So Denji is a devil hunter. Alongside Pochita, he uses Pochita like a chainsaw to kill devils. And unfortunately, he comes face to face with the zombie devil. What do we notice here? Ooh, there's a sense of foreboding, not only in the background, but maybe even in that shadow that is being casted by Denji itself. Ooh, the white gutters indicate that we are in a present moment. That is a comic convention that is used very often to indicate the present moment. Our zombie devil is white, and we have the return of the ambiguous shading. So the ambiguity threats from the previous one that we saw in a lot of the use of gray instead encapsulates Denji. We talked about how our main character stood out last time because he was mostly colored in white. So it seems like it transfixes us instead to think there's a twist that the zombie devil instead becomes the main, the primary person in kind of control of the narrative, the person at the forefront of the narrative. Ooh, these guys are also in gray. So something to note about the zombie devil is the zombie devil makes quote unquote deals with regular humans and then turns them into zombies. So their gray also mimics the use of gray in Denji. They used to be like Denji. It likens the two groups here. Almost like Denji is losing face so that he's the protagonist of his own story. Okay. I'm going to write that exactly. Protagonist of his own story. because we have that shift. Very, very nice. Let's move on to another one. Denji dies. Oopsies. Gets ripped to pieces by the zombie devil. And then we have this moment. After Denji's ripped up body is tossed into a garbage receptacle, Pochita and him have this moment. Now remember, I said that Denji's body has been ripped to shreds. So this moment is more metaphorical than anything. What do we notice returns to Denji? When he was appearing in those opening pages as our main character, he was enshrouded in lights. He takes on that gray ambiguity as an encroaching darkness approaches, and instead the zombie devil is the white figure on the page. And then we have solid lines, nice, and we have the return of light to his character representation. Pochita proceeds to give its heart to Denji. Oh. And Denji is able to, because of this, become Chainsaw Man. When he becomes Chainsaw Man, so it's almost like Pochita takes control of the narrative and reissues in Denji as main character. This is the moment in which he becomes the Chainsaw Man. Pochita's heart becomes his heart. What do we notice here? Why do we receive this full black treatment of Denji here? Okay, I like both of these readings. Not only might it highlight the clarity of Pochita's choice in choosing to give its heart to Denji, but it might also highlight the sense of loss and the despair at losing a loved one. I love y'all's readings of this because I think that both of these ideas of change and loss are super huge ideas that Chainsaw Man works with. Ideas of transformation and ideas of, as a result of that transformation, leaving something behind. So these things can be duly represented in the use of black. This is when he becomes the Chainsaw Man. And black suffuses him in the panel prior, and black spills from his enemies' bodies in the next. There is a bleeding that happens, a literal bleeding from feeling lost and from literal dismemberment. So again, these two ideas of transformation, of change, and loss, which happens, like I said, a lot in Chainsaw Man. We'll say that Chainsaw Man uses the limitations of the manga form to highlight the various ways in which our characters change, transform, and ultimately lose what is precious to them. Next, I want us to talk about Girl from the Other Side. So this is our teacher, and he's literally bleeding in. And this color is also bleeding towards Shiva in many of these opening pages. So he blends into the background. The whole first page is half black, half white. And we continuously have that black and white splits and the ways in which black and white come together in a lot of these images. So we have black here and white here. How do they meld? How do they blend? This is a story about Shiva, our titular character, living together with Teacher, our outsider. So we literally have a blending of the two colors in that first page, that opening page, as well as a blending of their lives together. So even though they are meant to be apart, and if he touches her, she could also become cursed and become an outsider, we still have them attempting to live together despite the very clear splits, the very clear boundary that should exist between black and white. Notice as well, what y'all have led me to think through as well, is the absence of gray. There's not a lot of gray used because we have to demarcate boundaries specifically with black and white. Gray for the in-betweens, it doesn't exist. No gray areas here. That demarcation, that boundary is very clear. Good, evil, cursed, not cursed. No middle choices. Exactly, Thoth. And yet we have two characters who are attempting to make a middle choice. The black boots that Shiva wears indicates that she is attempting to follow along with him, attempting to live together with him. So the outsider seems to be in his elements, black on black, while she seems to be more trapped by the black, which also is very much playing into the narrative, but it might even foreshadow for us the idea that she could become an outsider if she is following in his footsteps. The outsider is slightly gray in the lower part of his dress. All right. So maybe that influence goes both ways. They are both influencing one another, which we definitely see within the progress of the story. So we might say that Girl from the Other Side uses black and white to create clear boundaries between these different distinct ideas of good, evil, naive, mature, child, adult, while also asking what happens when those boundaries are broken, by also presenting questions and scenarios which challenge those very boundaries. These boundaries are presented to be broken. So this is the manga that inspired today's class, Witch Hat Atelier.
Editing Lily here. For the sake of time, I'll just be showing stills. Oh, look, there's one of the exercises we did during stream. Oh, look, another one. Take your time to pause where necessary and read my chicken scratch. There's the last one, swinging by around now. And be on the lookout for conclusions about the way that Witch Hat Atelier uses colors right about now.
Witch Hat Atelier not only uses black and white to represent the ways in which spells are drawn, can go out of control, naivety, innocence, but it also uses black and white and the mixture of the two to tell us a story that complicates what we think we know and foreshadows uncertain futures of our young character. That was today's keyword. Color, specifically, how mangas use color. It takes so much effort to not only look at a limitation that you might have because of the medium you work in, but then to use that limitation to your benefit. And so many mangas do this. So many mangas utilize their limited color scheme to tell us more about the characters and the narrative, to reveal to us things that might not have been apparent before, to foreshadow foreboding, evil, encroaching darkness, to suggest that we should break boundaries, to suggest that we might lose something. Color in manga has so many uses, even though there are only like 3. Thank you, everybody. And this has been Let's Talk Comics with Lily Sleeps Late. Was that hortensia enough for us?
Let's Talk Comics with Lily Sleeps Late.